how is it that some 20-year-old kid's meme train game earned $1.7 million on Steam in its first week? And what caused the insane hype that led to the biggest YouTubers like Markiplier and Jacksepticeye to showcase it? Well, it all boils down to this. The game's creator, Gavins Past, is an indie game dev prodigy genius with 3 intrinsic abilities that any aspiring game developer needs if you want any chance of succeeding with your game. But a big part of me couldn't help but wonder, was his success just pure luck? Was it really just being naturally talented? And can anyone even achieve his level of success? I'm usually a firm believer in the fact that anyone can get really good at anything, but there is one thing that I'm sure does separate masters like Gavin from beginners, and that is time. But if you're trying to juggle game dev with school, work, or life, you just don't have all the time in the world. So I decided that I had to go the extra mile here. I want to figure out a way that you can get to Gavin's level 5 times faster. But that would mean I'd have to find out if Gavin was always this talented, because if he was, that would ruin my whole theory. And to make matters worse, Gavin is also an accomplished YouTuber, because being ludicrously talented at one thing wasn't enough apparently. But on the bright side, he talks a lot about his past games on his channel.
I was just making whatever kind of games I could think of. Anything. The scariest thing is actually this really terrible horror game that I made as a prepubescent child. It's only scary because of what a stain to humanity's reputation it is.
The way he talks about these games is very different from when I started, which was, I want to make my huge dream game and I'm gonna do it. That game never got done. But growing up, Gavin seems to have been eager to experiment and create lots of different kinds of games. But not only that, although he didn't know it at the time, he was failing faster. But the other thing I realized from watching these videos is that Gavin has been releasing games since he was 12 years old, which means for this whole thing to work, I need to figure out how to get there in under 2 years. So to do just that, the first bare minimum thing to do, and I know this might seem counterintuitive to getting things done quickly, but bear with me, is to set aside your big game project or stop following that tutorial series and start making really tiny crappy games with whatever knowledge, no matter how limited, you currently have. There are 3 reasons why I think this works so well. One is because you're actually experiencing the release process and actually finishing games, which I know a lot of you struggle with because I know I did, and it helps you fail faster. But also 2, it allows you to get exposed to feedback and understand what players look for, which can be pretty harsh sometimes, so it might as well be targeted at games you are less proud of. And finally, 3, and actually this one ties in really well to Gavin's second intrinsic ability. Before releasing Choo-Choo Charles and Paper Smile, Gavin actually released a very polished and very beautiful walking simulator type game on Steam and called it Cloud Climber that I actually played before I even knew who he was. And I was very impressed. And so were Steam shoppers, because it's very rare for someone to put such a high quality game up on Steam for free. So if you become generous with your games like Gavin and have a lot of games on your itch.io page, or if you give out games for free on Steam, people will eventually start to notice and you'll naturally start to get better and better with every game. But there's also another secret added bonus of being generous on Steam, and maybe getting something for yourself out of it defeats the purpose, but at the end of the day, we are trying to make game development financially sustainable, so we sort of have to do what we can. Gavin picked up on this too. See, his free game got tons of attention on Steam. 3,000 reviews is an insanely big audience for a solo developer. And one of the first things you see when you go on the Cloud Climber page is actually an ad for Choo-Choo Charles. So he's cross-promoting himself to an audience that already really appreciates his work. It's just genius. But as I kept doing my research, I still had one big question on my mind that if I could get an answer to would completely overhaul the way you think about what you can actually achieve as a solo game dev. And that question was, how did Gavin get Markiplier to play his game? And the more I thought about it, the more it seemed like it really was just pure luck. See, Choo-Choo Charles isn't Gavin's only game that Markiplier played. He also picked up Paper Smile totally by chance. Gavin didn't reach out to him at all. It helps that the game is visually striking, but what if you're not a top 1% artist? Well, believe it or not, there's actually a very simple systematic strategy you can do to get streamers to play your games. The first way is to pay them, but I don't recommend it. The second way is actually the exact same advice as I always give to new game devs making their first game. Start small, except instead of making a small game, send your game to small YouTubers with less than 30,000 subscribers. You can actually see their emails over here in the About tab, and if their videos do well, you can then reach out to slightly bigger YouTubers with proof that they should showcase your game. And then you keep doing that with bigger and bigger YouTubers. And even if Markiplier doesn't play your game, you will still get tons of wishlists from this strategy. But there was still a major problem with all this, because the truth is that the bigger streamers just won't be interested in your game unless it's a really good idea, which brings us to the most important skill that Gavin mastered. But before we get into it, I do want to talk real quick about something a little touchy, which is basically that I need to figure out a way to sustain these videos. And I don't want to take any sponsorships, but I knew that if I asked for something from you, I want to give back, so I decided to start a Patreon where you can get a written version of my videos, exclusive Discord channels, and extra juicy game dev info. But if that's not your thing, I totally understand. You're here to learn game dev, so I do have a free indie game starter guide PDF that you can get in the description, and maybe even hit that subscribe button for more densely packed informative videos like this one. Okay, back to Gavin. The ultimate reason why Choo-Choo Charles did so well, and the proof that luck was only a small part of it, is that Gavin was very intentional with his game idea. But don't take my word for it, here's what he said.
And I realized that there are very, very few. As a matter of fact, there's almost no games, no horror games specifically, that parody kids' TV shows. Horror games are infamous for just taking your childhood joys and making them horrific.
What Gavin picked up on here is one of the 3 elements of the perfect game idea, which is familiarity, or in this case, nostalgia. He talks about how Five Nights at Freddy's also did this, and this is literally why Star Wars or Spider-Man games do so well. People are crazy about those franchises, so they have built-in familiarity hype. The second part of this is uniqueness, or a twist. So you take that familiar thing like Thomas the Tank Engine, and you turn him into a monstrous spider train. And although Gavin specifically said he wasn't inspired by this, the fact that one of the most popular mods for Skyrim replaces dragons with Thomas proves that the sort of cultural zeitgeist of nostalgia is very much alive. I don't know what to call this whole cultural thing, but another big nostalgic icon would be something like Shrek or Garfield. But there's still one question that remains unanswered, and that's, is it possible to actually reach Gavin's level in only 2 years? And while I don't think any of us will be making millions anytime soon, I definitely think that making lots of small games, giving some out for free, growing your audience, reaching out to YouTubers, and innovating every time will help you start out on the right track. But there is one more thing that you absolutely need, which Gavin mastered early on, and not doing this almost made me quit game dev forever when making my first commercial game. So to make sure you avoid that and actually get your game done, watch this video next, because I put together all the strategies game devs use to finish their games and make sure they don't fall into overscope. Don't forget your free starter guide, and Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and God bless.